Services YouTube page. Due to the government guidelines on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the provisions set out in the Local Authorities and Police and Crime Panels Regulations 2020. Minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the Fire Services YouTube page. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all members to keep their video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep their microphones muted except when I invite them to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. Any members wishing to ask questions or make a comment should indicate this by clicking the raised hand function on the right hand side of your screen. When I invite you to speak, please unmute your microphone, ask your question, and then mute it again to allow the officer to respond. As with all new arrangements, especially those involving a new system, there is always a risk we may run into technical problems, and I was asked for your patience if we do so. Should this occur, I will declare an adjournment when the fault is addressed, and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. We'll begin by calling the names of all members to establish your presence. Can I ask Dawn to please do the register?
Councillor Barbara Ashwood.
Present.
Councillor Andrew Bond. Councillor Simon Bywater.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Andy Coles.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Ian Gardner.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Derek Giles.
I'm here, present.
Councillor John Gowing.
Present.
Councillor Linda Harford.
Present.
Councillor Bill Hunt.
Present.
Councillor Mohammed Jamil, we've just received apologies. Councillor Sebastian Kindersley.
Good afternoon, Chairman.
Councillor Matt Maguire.
Present.
Councillor David Over.
Present.
Councillor Kevin Reynolds.
I'm here.
Councillor Jocelyn Scott.
Present.
Councillor Mike Shellens.
Here.
And Councillor Mandy Smith.
Present.
Thank you for that. So apologies wise, we've just got Councillor Jamil and we've not heard from Councillor Bond.
That's correct, Chairman.
Right, thank you. Duly noted. Does any member at this stage, does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory interest? No. Okay, let's move on. We'll deal with the minutes of the meeting that are held on the 22nd of October. We've been asked to approve the minutes of that meeting, which was held on the 22nd of October 2020 as a correct record. Any member who does not agree with this proposal to click the raised right hand function. I cannot see anybody disagreeing. So on that basis, those minutes are approved. I will sign the hard copies when I am next in the office. We now move on to the next item, which is Chairman's announcement. Due to the agenda we have before us today, I will not read them verbatim. As my announcements have been circulated to all of you, you may not have got them. They've only just been sent in the last hour or so. But I'll draw your attention to some highlights. First and most importantly, Councillor Janet Goodwin. It is with the greatest sadness that I must report the passing just before Christmas of Councillor Janet Goodwin. Janet was most recently appointed by Peterborough City Council to the Fire Authority in May 2018, but had served on the Fire Authority on and off for many years. Many of us knew Janet well. She was an excellent contributor to Fire Authority meetings and a staunch supporter of the fire service. She was also a very good friend with a great sense of humour, and I have sent condolences to her family and friends on behalf of the Fire Authority. She will of course be sadly missed by us all. And in respect to Janet and recognition of her service, could I ask for a minute's silence, please? Thank you. Thank you, members. On a lighter note, I'm delighted to welcome Andy Cole from Peterborough City Council to the Fire Authority. Andy brings a wealth of experience and knowledge with him. Andy, we normally have a formal induction programme for new members, as there are invariably items you need to get up to speed on. But given the short time this administration has, and the way we are stretching resources with our COVID endeavours, it will not be so comprehensive as we all would have liked. I will ask Deb Thompson to get in touch with you to give you an overview on items of a significant interest. And of course, Deb, myself and the Chief can be available if you wish any more in-depth details of any subject area at all. You're most welcome to join us.
Thank you very much, Chair, and for that welcome. Thank you.
Okay. In my announcements, there's a note about the outcome of Her Majesty's inspectors of our COVID arrangements. And I'm absolutely delighted to confirm again that the inspection came out very well for us, and all the endeavours that's been going on behind the scenes by our staff have been recognised. And again, Cambridgeshire comes to the front. This morning at the seminar, we made reference to the upcoming general inspection by Her Majesty's inspectors, and they commence on the week of the 22nd of February. Again, there's more details in my written announcements. Another area I'm delighted to again bring to your attention is a Queen's Fire Service Medal Award. Members will be aware that in late December last year, we received the wonderful news that Chief Fire Officer Chris Strickland was to receive the Queen's Fire Service Medal in the New Year's Honours List. Chris has provided outstanding leadership throughout his career in Cambridgeshire, which has been particularly prevalent during the pandemic, and has certainly been a contributing factor in us being recognised as one of the top performing services in the country. An obvious, great and very well deserved achievement for Chris, and one I'm sure you will join me in publicly congratulating him. I've also brought to your attention community volunteering, along with a corresponding update. And the final item in my announcements was the St John's development, which Matthew gave you further details on this morning. And if we can now move on to the main body of the agenda and the meat, so to speak, and that's the draft Fire Authority budget, item 5. Matthew, can I ask you to please introduce this report?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, good afternoon, members. So we start, if I can, by way of introduction. I'm assuming all members have read the papers, and clearly we went through it this morning on the seminar. But if I can start on page 19, which is the budget book, and on to page 20, effectively just gives a summary of what it means for us in terms of funding for next financial year. There has been a small decrease in funding, largely associated with our business rates, again, which I took members through this morning. Clearly that does have an impact on us, and obviously collection rates are down for the current financial year, and we expect that to continue into the new financial year. Now, government are suggesting that they are going to safeguard that funding by way of grants, which we hope will come through by the end of the financial year, would give us some certainty. But this budget is generally built on effectively a position where there is no increase in pay. There's a small increase from an inflationary perspective on non-pay items of 1%. And then, if you like, where the growth is for the authority budget next year are on things like mental health and wellbeing, enhancement of our cleaning services. That's related to COVID, which again I articulated this morning. And the final thing is around enhancing first aid training for our operational firefighters at scene. So that is it in terms of growth for next year. And what that does do is brings us obviously in a budget of where I recommend a 2% increase in council tax, but generally there's no other growth for the service next financial year. So in that sense, it's a straightforward budget to prepare. Clearly what it does do is just give us some complexities in terms of how we balance the budget moving forward, because again, national context, members will be aware that we continue to be one of the lower funded authorities when we look at many measures. So actually, depending on what CSR brings in the future, will potentially bring us some significant challenges. But really, I'm happy to take any questions. There's more detail in terms of the budget on page 40 of the budget book, of your pack moving forward. It does give you a further breakdown, and it also talks just prior to that some detail around the capital programme as well, which again the chairman's alluded to includes St John's and the development of the training facility. But more than happy to take any questions that the Fire Authority may have.
Okay, members, I know we dealt with it in detail this morning at the seminar, but you may have had time to reflect upon it and once again read the papers. Are there any questions or points of detail that you would like? And Jocelyn, please.
Yes, look, thank you, Chair. It just occurred to me to ask, why is it that in Cambridge we have a lower sum than some other parts of the country? Because I understand it in the context of the education budget, though one certainly doesn't approve the difference. It does appear to be some sort of logic attached to it, which goes back to the past. So I was wondering, Matthew, are you able to tell us why we have that difference in the context of the Fire Authority? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. I mean, it's the same principle really applies. It's that historic nature of the funding formula. So it's very much has been based around, if you like, urban, rural context. And as a Fire Authority, clearly we're a rural service, and as such, over a very long period of time, the funding hasn't necessarily equaled up or been equalised in any way, shape or form. So this is a legacy that goes back as long as I can remember in local government, and certainly when I was working at the county council 20 plus years ago now, the issues exist and they just haven't changed effectively. It's a very, very difficult issue to remedy, I would suggest, moving forward. How do you balance that up if you're going to take away from those areas that do rely on the government funding and suddenly pass it to what would be, if you like, the local electorate via council tax? I'm not sure how government are going to ever be able to balance that particular problem. So it's a legacy, and we continue with that legacy, but it'd be interesting to see as and when there is a formula review how they seek to remedy it.
Okay. Sebastian, followed by Ian.
Thank you. Well, I'm surprised Councillor Scott, being such an avid student of history, as we learned this morning, doesn't know the answer to her question, because the answer is that back in the day, i.e. the 70s, when Jean Barker was leader of, I think it was probably chairman of local authorities in Cambridgeshire at the time, her ambition was to have Cambridgeshire as the lowest precepting authority in the country. And we are still paying the price for that across all of our services.
Scott was asking Matthew for the answer for that question, but thank you for that bit of history there.
You're very welcome, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, my question was with regard to on page 39, was with regard to the Kimbolton Fire Station. I wonder if you could just go into a bit more detail with regard to the station modernisation for that particular station, please, Matthew. That'd be much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gardner. Yeah, so effectively, it will be a relatively small refurbishment of that station. It's one of those legacy stations that actually hasn't had an awful lot of money spent on it for a significant period of time. So we'll be looking to upgrade welfare facilities that have been long-standing, probably 20 plus years old. So really, it's a small makeover, and again, it will make it more energy efficient as well. So that's really where we're at with that.
Thank you very much for that, Matthew.
Any more? I cannot see any hands raised. So this morning's seminar served a useful purpose. I'm pleased about that. No, so I'm going to move on to the recommendations then. You've had the recommendations pointed out to you. Is there anybody who does not wish to approve those recommendations? I think that'll be the simplest way to deal with this. If you disagree with them, please raise your hand. No, I can't see that. I see no objections, so we will take the recommendations as laid out in the report as approved. Thank you. Normally budget items can take hours. That was good. We'll now move on to the next item, which is the members' allowance scheme. And can I ask Shaheen to introduce the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, members. Just before I launch into the report, obviously the subject matter of this report affects all the members, and it would normally be something that you would declare a pecuniary interest about. But given that it affects all of you and we do need to have a debate and vote on the matter, I have granted a dispensation to all members to allow you to speak and vote on the matter, and I'll make sure that is properly recorded in these minutes. So the paper is at page 43 of your papers, and you'll see it's the standard agenda item that we have related to members' allowance and the scheme. And the current scheme takes us to the end of March of this year, and the paper addresses some options to go forward. Historically here at the Fire Authority, we have piggybacked onto the Cambridgeshire County Council's allowance scheme, and that has made sense, particularly I think in the last couple of years when we've been in the shadows of potential governance change and the future of this authority was very much in the balance. But I'm delighted to say that certainly for the foreseeable future, there is no such threat to the authority's existence, although of course we have looming the white paper and some new proposals about changes to governance. But that will depend on also the future PCC and any appetite they have for change, and of course the existence of a credible business case to do so. So certainly for the foreseeable future, the allowance scheme is something that we do have to attend to. And when I was reflecting on this, one of the things that an independent review panel would do is to look at what members actually do for that authority and the value that they add. And of course, because we've always piggybacked onto the county council scheme, that sort of exercise and that focus on what members do here has never really happened. And it feels to me that that's something of a disservice to this authority. in that there has never been a focus based on the allowance scheme of looking at what members do, the value they add, you know, the strategic direction that you set, the culture that you foster in terms of working across the political divide and so on. And so it seems to me that there is an opportunity for us to perhaps look at that and have a focus for this authority specifically. We can benchmark, of course, that's one of the things that an IRP would do against other fire authorities. And I think that also adds to transparency and openness about what we do and how we do it, and the value of that in democracy terms. Now that doesn't happen quickly, so the initial proposal is that we continue with the current scheme as you've got it for 12 months, and look at the spending review and how that's impacted on staff pay. There's no increases to staff pay, so the proposal is that allowance scheme continues as is, and then for your next meeting, for me to bring you back some costings and proposals of what an independent review panel might look like. So you've got some time to think about it before you embark on that. So, Chairman, those are my recommendations, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments from members.
I cannot see anybody who wishes to ask any questions at this stage. My question would be, when you refer to a review panel, are you talking about a review panel made up of elected members, or were you thinking of having an external review panel?
Oh, Chairman, I think it would have to be an external independent review panel, and there are you know, numerous panels out there that have expertise in doing this sort of thing, and my thinking was to talk to other fire authorities and to see if we can, you know, find expertise that currently exists.
Okay, thank you. Sebastian, followed by Andy. Sebastian.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope I'm right in saying that when you refer to the scheme as set out in the appendix, you mean the scheme as set out in the schedule. I find it quite difficult to go through the papers online, so I might have got that wrong, but that's just a sort of technical issue. Generally speaking, we completely, in every authority I've ever been involved in, completely ignore the recommendations of any independent panel. And so my concern would be that this would be precisely the same, and that we would ignore the recommendations of our own panel, and hence a whole load of taxpayers' money will have been wasted on a process plus time and goodwill, because they're obviously independent people. So from that perspective, I have some concerns, despite the fact that in my head, I know it's a perfectly logical and perfectly sensible and perfectly appropriate way forward. So I just would invite members to consider that. In terms of the recommendation for the forthcoming year, correct me please if I've got this wrong, but it is that the scheme should be frozen in terms of the actual amounts, which I think is in this day and age also a perfectly acceptable and sensible way forward. So I hope members would agree that. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any response to the points made by Sebastian? He was a bit confused over the papers. Do you want to put him right?
Yes, it's the scheme that is. I can't see immediately whether we've said it's an appendix, but it's the scheme that starts at. Bear with me. Page. I'll tell you in a second. Page 46 of your papers.
Okay, thank you. Andy, followed by David.
Thank you, Chair. As a new member, it's something of a surprise to see that one gets an allowance for attendance. I appreciate the police authority used to be the same until the Police and Crime Panel was brought about with the Police and Crime Commissioner, and then that all changed quite dramatically for members that attended. So I'm just very much in support of freezing things as they are, but I would like to consider whether there is going to be some value in waiting a little bit until we know which way the wind is blowing before you set up a new independent panel, which may not necessarily be able to be in existence for very long. So that was my question.
Yeah.
Chairman, did you want me to come in?
Yes, if you would, please. Yeah.
Yeah, so Chairman, it's just a proposal. It's a matter for members. I know there are strong views, especially in Cambridgeshire, given the Cambridgeshire members' experience of their own recommendations. So, you know, these are, I've brought it to just see if there's any appetite for setting up an IRP, and if there isn't, then that's absolutely fine. We'll carry on as we are. And in terms of pausing, I think we've kind of been on pause on a lot of the issues that certainly from a governance point of view, I would have liked to move forward in. And I think there comes a point where, you know, you pause indefinitely and then business doesn't get done. So it's a careful balance, I think, as to how long we pause business for.
Yes, I'd agree. David, followed by Linda.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I've been quite happy about piggybacking on what Cambridgeshire County Council organised. It seems to be fair, modest, and reasonable. So I'm not too enthusiastic about an independent pay review body. However, I think we would be mad to increase anything this year with regards to allowances. But I do issue a bit of a warning that we had a similar situation in Peterborough a few years ago, where because of economic problems and whatever, and every year seems to have economic problems, I think it was nearly 10 years where there was no increase in allowances. And then there was a sudden huge increase to catch up. And it led to all sorts of adverse publicity in the newspaper and comments about councillors feeding at the trough again. So I think we need to take a little bit of care over the next 18 months about allowances and carry on with this increase based on inflation and Cambridgeshire County Council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Linda.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I endorse what's been said by my colleagues about not having any increase this year. I think that would be insensitive and inappropriate. In terms of a review, I understand exactly where Councillor Kindersley is coming from, but it is difficult, isn't it, to show good governance without looking at the processes that you have in place. And obviously, in this particular instance, it would need to be an external body reviewing it. So I'm sort of on the fence about that one. I appreciate that it will cost money and that if we then don't take the advice, it's wasted money. But I'm always optimistic that given good advice, members do consider it carefully. The one thing I would say in agreement with Councillor Coles is that I'm not sure this is the right time to do it, not because of COVID or anything else, but because of not knowing exactly what the future is going to be and the whole governance structure changing. So I think that's a consideration. But overall, I think I am just in favour of showing good governance by having an external review, but urging caution about when we do it. Thank you.
Derek.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I hear what Councillor Cole said about the police authority. My understanding is that when the police authority was in being, they did have an allowance, and then when it was taken over and became the PCC, that allowance was taken away. But I believe that there are moves afoot now to reinstate that. Whether that has any bearing on whether we should look towards doing away with our fire authority if it ever merged or not, I don't know. But I think that needs clarifying that, as I say, as far as the PCC is concerned, there are moves afoot to reinstate it. Thank you.
Okay, there's nobody else at the moment. there never is a right time to review members' allowances. There never is, and you can't get away from that. I know we all wish we didn't have to do this particular task. It's an awful task from where we sit. But the reason I don't think the time is right at the moment is because in a few months' time, we're going to have a new administration, and probably none of us will, who knows, will be on the Fire Authority then, if we're going to stand at all. So I'm a little bit reluctant to commit a new administration to something that they may not wish to pursue. Personally, I think holding things as they are at the moment is perfectly fine, acceptable, and we've done our job and reviewed it. I personally wouldn't like to commit to an independent review panel. If the new administration wishes to do it, then all well and good. But we're coming to the end of our life, so to speak, and I don't think it will be necessarily a good thing to do in the last few months. That said, we've got those I was going to say it seems most people were not in favour of independent panel, but then the last few speakers did sort of show that they would like to go down that road. So the recommendations that we've got are in two parts. Is the allowance rates within Appendix 1, which is basically what we're on now, are agreed and applied for the period 1st of April to 21 to 22, which to me seems reasonable and fair. And at the next meeting, the second recommendation is that its next meeting consider options and cost review for a review of the allowances. Rather than do it at the next meeting, I'd like to tide that second part over until the new Fire Authority is formed. And by then, we will be more certain of what's coming out of central government, because I understand there is imminently directions coming from the Home Office. I believe it's Lord Greenall who's going to publish quite a detailed report on what will be happening with regard to fire authorities, police and crime commissioners, and all other associated matters. So if we commit to something now, we might be jumping the gun there. So with that in mind, would you be happy just to approve the first part of the allowances, that is to tread water, and then not to approve the second part, to review costs and options until the new Fire Authority is formed? Would that garner a degree of support, or do you wish to take the recommendations as a Councillor Mandy? Yes.
I'd be happy to support that, Chairman.
Oh, thank you. Well, is there anybody who, yeah, Andy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to second that. I think if it was possible to amend the date just to June, then we'd be there, wouldn't we?
We would, and I think that's a sensible thought. The trouble is that being the first meeting of the new Fire Authority, June will be a pretty congested meeting with chairmanships and tasks here and tasks there. So if we can leave it loosely worded to the in the early life of the new Fire Authority within the first few meetings, then I think that would fit everybody's needs. Would that be workable, Shaheen? Does that sound a reasonable option or a road for us to take?
Chairman, yes, that's a very sensible way forward, I think, and we can word the minutes so that in the first few meetings of the new Fire Authority, a paper will be brought back if appropriate, and we'll assess the situation as officers and advise the chairman at the time as to what the emerging thinking from the Home Office is.
Okay, before I formally agree, we've got Sebastian and Simon wish to say a few words. Sebastian, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Notwithstanding my earlier comments, I think on reflection that it is what you're suggesting is a sensible way forward. We have a principle, don't we, that we don't tie the hands of future governments. So on that basis, I would be happy not to tie the hands of a future fire authority either. So I think let's leave it up to the new fire authority effective May, and they can decide what, when, how, and where.
Thank you for that, Simon.
I think it's already been said, Chairman. I support what you proposed. Thanks.
Right. Thank you, much appreciated. Mac did have your hand up. You've all been said, I guess, Mac. Right, if there is anybody...
Yes, Chairman, I took it down because, sorry, I took my hand down deliberately.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody who disagrees with that way forward? Please put your hand up. No, thank you for that. Then that is agreed. That is agreed. Did that make sense to you, Dawn? Because you're taking the notes and guide us on action in this. Did that?
Yes, it did, Chairman. No problem.
Thank you very much for that. If we can now move on to the next item, item 7, draft pay policy statement. And over to you, Matthew.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, members will probably be familiar with this as a principle. It was introduced as part of the Localism Act in 2011, where all authorities effectively have to set out their pay structure in the form of a statement on an annual basis. It pretty much is the same as last year's. There's a couple of pieces that change year on year. So in 1.7 on page 58 of your pack, there's the ratio between those lowest earners in the service versus the highest earner, and that's at 1.71 to 7.69 is the ratio now. So that's actually quite a low rate, or a lower rate than it has been over a period of time. And the other point I really just wanted to highlight for members was that in 6.1 around severance payments, I've actually highlighted there, it says there's all relevant legislative requirements are adhered to, and that is talking around the introduction of capping if somebody exit cap if somebody was to leave the authority's employment. So I haven't been as specific as that. I've just said all legislative requirements will be adhered to. So that's it really. Other than that, everything else is pretty much the same as last year. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Members, any questions, queries, points of detail you want clarification on? Okay, Jocelyn.
I actually just want to say thank you very much to Nick Mills for letting me back in. And I should make it clear, I did hear Councillor Kindersley's wonderful exposition of the historical background to the formula, so I thank him for that. And I didn't leave in high dudgeon having heard his history lesson. It was very much appreciated. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that. Right, there seems to be a consensus in support of the recommendation. Nobody's signified that they disagree with it in any way. So we'll move on. We'll now move on to item 8, the Services Wellbeing Strategy. And can I ask John Anderson to introduce this report? John, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, members. Hopefully you have had a chance to have a look at our mental health and wellbeing strategy and the attached action plan. What I would ask, if you are satisfied with what you've seen, is to approve the new strategy. We will then get it published and communicate it out to all of our staff. I'd also like to take the opportunity to highlight some of the work we've done over the last 18 months around supporting our staff in ensuring they have good mental health and wellbeing. So we've developed the strategy and some branding, and we've set out our vision for what mental health and wellbeing should look like within the service. We've reviewed our TRIM processes, which is something that's put in place to help operational crews if they deal with a particularly challenging incident and they need some support, and that's a peer support that's provided by their colleagues. We've done a lot of work, including setting up posters and provision on the intranet around all the things that are in place to support people. We had a Time to Talk day in February. We have put a lot of support in place to support firefighters following attending difficult incidents. We're putting out messages around flexible working regularly. People have very much been at the centre of all of our decisions when we've been dealing with COVID. We now have a new 24/7 wellbeing single point of contact, which is available via Cambridgeshire Constabulary. All members of staff have been given credit card size cards, which give them details of how to contact mental health professionals in case of emergencies. We're also commissioning Affinity Healthcare to work with us to deliver a bespoke training package for all staff to help them manage their mental health. The strategy document that has been provided, hopefully you will see that our strategy is around 3 pillars of maintaining good mental health. The first and possibly the most important is prevention, and that's about giving activities and initiatives that hopefully encourage and enable staff to look after their mental health and protect themselves from developing poor mental health. It's very much that prevention is definitely better than cure, and that's what we're really trying to work and focus on. Then there's protection, and this is about where people know they've been exposed to things which are difficult or may cause them stress, and it's things there to support them during that time. And then we have response, where if unfortunately someone is having issues and they know that their mental health or wellbeing is compromised, that there's professional support available to help them deal with that. So those are the 3 areas, and that's been set out within the strategy. So I'm happy to leave it there and take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Well, we've got some questions, and Sebastian followed by Andy.
Thank you, Chairman. And not so much a question, actually, as a comment. One of the advantages of having been on the Fire Authority for some years now is that I've been able to see the genesis of what I think is in front of us, a splendid piece of work. It just fills me with so much confidence about the way the service treats colleagues. And having followed through the various meetings and the development of this strategy, I applaud it, and I only wish other authorities locally took such a proactive and enthusiastic approach to mental health and well-being. So well done, and I very much look forward to seeing at some point in the future a report back explaining the positive impacts of the implementation of this strategy across the entire service. So big thumbs up from me, and well done.
Well, thank you for those very kind and positive comments. And that, among many other things, is one of the reasons we do get recognised at a national level. Can I now ask Andy, followed by Linda?
Chair, thank you very much. I also would like very much to support the strategy as I've seen it. Of course, it's in very brief form for review. The area I'm particularly interested in, having had a similar experience of mental health and well-being within the police service, is how one can support the wider family of the staff member, and whether that's considered in the process, because I don't see anything within the document. I appreciate it might be there, but it's just a summary and it may not be there. But I'd be interested to know how a member of staff who potentially could be in difficulty also has support rendered towards the family to maintain their mental health.
I'm happy to answer that, Councillor. A lot of these services are available also for members of staff's families. For example, the fire service charity, members of a family of firefighters and support staff are able to access that and use their facilities. And yeah, so it maybe it's something we should make more explicit in the strategy, that it is available there for families as well.
Thank you. I think it would be appreciated because I know sometimes the effect of a particularly post-traumatic event on the family can be really quite devastating. So I think that might be very useful just to see it explicit.
Okay, thank you for that. Very good comment. Linda, followed by Barbara.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And Councillor Kindersley has said or most of what I was going to say. But I am going to indulge myself and again applaud the work that is done by the service to support its people. Councillor Kindersley is absolutely right when he holds it up as an exemplar that should be replicated in other places. What I did want to say is, and you'll know that I've had some involvement with this document previously, is that it does very clearly make a commitment to evaluating the activities that deliver the strategy, both through the monitoring of hard data and through taking feedback from staff. But I cannot see that we currently have done anything towards delivering that commitment. And the only reason I raise this is because we see what's being done. We have every confidence that officers are doing a great job of looking after their staff. But when it comes to an external examination of the work, that measurement is really important to be demonstrated. So that's the only thing I would ask. I would ask some attention be given to. I am going to mention one thing. It's more of a comment really than a question. I'm really concerned about some of the research that is now being done, and also the anecdotal evidence I see of the impacts of remote working for staff within organisations. And I think I recall correctly that this has already been recognised by the service, and that they have made that there has been steps taken to allow people to come back into a COVID safe workplace. I would urge that there is great attention paid to this, regardless of the restrictions that are in place at the moment. I know we have to obey them, but some of the damage that's being done, I think, is a lot more than is currently recognised. And dare I say it, not just to individuals, but to the value that they give to the organisations that they work for. So just a comment on that, and I will be making it in other arenas too, because I think it is something that is not getting quite the amount of attention that it requires. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to congratulate John on a superb piece of work again. Your reports always bring me joy. They're easy to read, but they give me so much information. And this is a subject that's very close to my heart. I applaud CFRS for thinking so much about their staff and coming up with this sort of strategy. I wish it could be publicised everywhere and people forced to take note of it and implement it elsewhere as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'll thank everybody for their kind words and comments about that. I know John and other members of our staff puts an awful lot of hard work into these not quite so glamorous subject areas behind the scenes, and it is appreciated by our staff. I know that. Before we move on, was there anything else you wish to say, John, before we move on?
I'd just like to say thank you to Amy Jackson, who's done a lot of the work and has led this area extremely well.
Okay, then. I've seen nobody who objects to the recommendation, which is really, it's just to note it and support it being communicated to the staff. So we'll move on now. We'll now move on to the annual review, the operation of ICT shared services, and that will be introduced by John Fagg. John, over to you.
Unfortunately, if I can, Chairman, sorry, John is actually on leave today, unfortunately. So you've got my dulcet tones again. I'm really sorry.
Where he was, I couldn't see him.
Yeah, he's on leave, so I said I'll take it for him. So just in terms of this, as members, or for those members that are not aware, we have a shared service with Bedfordshire for all of our ICT functions, and really every year we present a report on its delivery and how it's doing. You'll appreciate that this year has been quite different from an ICT perspective to any other, particularly with COVID. And really on page 82 of your pack, in section 7, really over the page on section 7.6, we talk about the home working. And what I would say here is that, and I'm sure colleagues will support this, the way we turned on our remote working overnight, and we're able to function as a service within 24 hours really does lay testament to actually the shared service and what they've delivered over the last few years, because whilst they've been putting a lot of the foundations in place, it really has really helped us just to continue to function and deliver hopefully everything you're seeing in front of you today. So just some examples. We've upgraded our wide area network over the last year. We've done a complete Wi-Fi refresh. All of our support, if you like, our support and work at home, notwithstanding Councillor Harford's comments, have been delivered a new laptop that we're all working from now. We've had the infrastructure and the technology to support us. So I think, in spite of everything, this year they should take a lot of grief as well, and they have taken a lot of grief over the years, but they should take some real accolades this year, because they've helped us just continue to function, and I would say seamlessly. Just over the page, just to highlight the cost factors. So on page 83 at 10.2 in the table there, you'll see between us and Bedfordshire, we are actually the more efficient service in terms of ICT costs. You'll see that the team cost us less than half of the total for 1920, and that was last year, and we expect that to be the same this year, despite us being the slightly larger fire and rescue service. So again, that probably shows just how we have implemented certain technologies over the last few years. Other than that, there's probably not a lot more I want to say. I wanted just to highlight that we are in a changing world. We are moving to more cloud-based technologies where we need to. And again, whilst Zoom is obviously a forum for us at the moment, we're looking to move to we have moved to Microsoft 365, which obviously Teams is the predominant player when it comes to these type of meetings for us now. But that's working well as well. So really, that's all I wanted to say. I think I just pass on my thanks to the team. Because they have done a very good job and worked extremely flexibly throughout these times. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, thank you, Matthew. We have been asked to note the report or make any observations or questions. Anybody want any points of clarification? If not, oh yes, Sebastian.
Thank you, Chairman. Later on in the report, later on in the agenda, we are asked to consider various risks and so on. And I see that one of our risks has dropped from 16 to 4, and that this is in relation to the joint administration of the ICT shared service. So am I to assume that these two are connected?
Absolutely. So we went through a review of the governance model for shared service about 12 months ago, Councillor Kindersley, because there was some concern in terms of the divergence of strategies between the organisations, but they've been brought together, and actually from a collaboration perspective now we're working in the same direction. We're looking to put the same infrastructure in, so that's why that risk, well spotted, has actually been reduced significantly.
Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. It's very unusual for me to have experienced praise which has not engendered lots of people protesting about it for an IT system and an ICT combination. And I just wish to put on record that I think that they've done a marvelous job, and I wish that others could learn by their example. Thank you, that's all.
I think we all know who you may be referring to, and that's both principal authorities, so we perhaps won't take.
Chairman, I couldn't possibly comment.
No, you couldn't, but I could. So we'll draw our own conclusions. But thank you for that comment. Right, no more questions. We'll then note the report and move on. And in moving on, we have Matthew again. If you could.
Thank you again, Chairman. So this is a budget update report for the current financial year to the end of December 2020. So on page 95, so Appendix 1, there's a table there that effectively gives you an overview at a overview summary of where we're at in terms of budget to date. You'll see full-time firefighters are overspending, and members will be aware that we are operating over establishment at the moment because we are projecting retirements. So we are training our firefighters. So as and when those people drop out of the system, those retirees, we are not under establishment. We do hold a reserve for that, and we will be drawing down on that reserve at the end of the financial year. There are we are now moving to introduce what we're hoping will be a more flexible system, because at the moment we're very much if you like, hampered in terms of our recruitment by having to send large numbers of recruits away at any one time. And what we'd like to do is make it a more flexible, where we can just send 2 or 3 people away, or even do the training ourselves, so we don't have these huge swings, which means that we won't need the reserve for the future. So we are working on that as we speak, to ensure that we can control it better moving forward. Other than that, other headlines, you can see there's a number of underspends there in property maintenance, largely some of those are COVID related. Some of those are just because we haven't been able to do the work as quickly as we'd have hoped this year, as are transport and the movable plant. That's largely COVID related, that underspend, because BP have kindly extended the offer of free fuel again for our appliances. So the first time round we saved about 30,000 to 25,000 pounds on fuel, and they've extended it again until the end of this financial year now. So we expect to save another chunk of money there, which is great, great for the service. And then other bits and bobs within the budget. You'll see other income is looking at a large underspend. That's largely relating to the additional grant we've got. So I'd expect that by the end of the year, that will be leveled off with the money we've already spent. So I'm expecting us to come in probably overspent this year by the end of the year, largely due to the full-time firefighters. What we won't know at the moment is what those other underspends are, in terms of transport, and how that will offset that overspend, because clearly that will reduce the burden on the reserve. The only other thing I wanted to report was in terms of capital expenditure, your members will be aware that we bought 2 new aerial appliances. Those are both in service, and we are looking to bring one of those, the one north of the county, on the run. So make it operational imminently. John may have an exact date. I know it had to be pushed back a little bit because we've had some crewing challenges in the north of the county, but that is looking to come online imminently, and by all accounts they have been well received, the new aerial appliances. So really, any questions that members may have?
Would it be fair to say that the huge swings on recruitment costs are not really of our making? Is something historical, where recruits used to be brought in quite large batches, and as they come to the end of their service, then we're having to replace in larger batches than we normally would.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah. So members will probably be aware that the pension scheme is effectively a 30-year scheme, and many years ago, when a new watch was introduced in 19 something, that large amounts of firefighters were taken on at that time. Clearly, they're all dropping off at a similar time. It sounds awful. Retiring at the same time together in bulk. So yeah, that's absolutely the challenge that we have at the moment.
Okay. David. David.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm there. It's just a small point. I'm intrigued about how BP is being encouraged to sponsor the fuel supply for the fire authority. What's in it for them, apart from what's in it for us? I can understand that, but why is BP doing this?
Well, it's actually across the whole of the emergency service sector, Councillor Over. So it's police and ambulance as well. And they've done it in response to the pandemic. So I suppose from their perspective, the positivity that they're showing and support they're showing for those public services that need it at this particular time. So they haven't asked for anything more than that.
Okay, right. Just curious. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Chair.
Chris, you wish to make a comment?
Thanks, Chair. It was just in relation to the comments around recruitment, and I think the other aspect that needs to be borne in mind is, we do have a number of people who could go, but they don't necessarily do go, and that then causes us problems because over the last 10 years or so we've slimmed down the system, so it's highly efficient. It also means that it hasn't got a lot of capacity in it to absorb shortfalls. So we have to predict when people are likely to go and then fill accordingly, because we can't afford to allow to go under establishment by too much. Yeah. And that is a bit of an art. And if you guess it too wrong, then you obviously end then overspending for a period of time. So yes, it is quite complicated. And as Matthew said, if we can get to the point where we could do just-in-time recruitment, that would be quite helpful to us.
Okay, thank you for that. That makes it clearer. Well, we're being asked to note the contents of this report, and that is duly noted. If we can now move on to the next one, strategic risk. Matthew, you again.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so I'm only going to focus on those the highest risks if members are happy with that, although I'm happy to take any questions on any others, and in between myself, John and Chris, I'm sure we can answer those. So on page 109, there's hopefully a useful matrix which highlights those highest risk areas for us as we see at the moment. It's the same old suspects, if you like. So ESMCP is on there. So this is a government-led project to replace our current airwave communication system. So it's the way we communicate when we're on our fire appliances and such like incidents. They're looking to introduce effectively one that was based on mobile technology, like mobile phones, but it's taking some significant time. John may be able to add more if members want any more detail on it, but it is dragging on, and we expect it to drag on even further. But we have very little in the way of understanding of when it will come into place, the impact it's going to have financially, and how sustainable that product will be as it stands at the moment. So that's if you like our major risk as we see at the moment, along with the risk of cyber attacks, which again is another one that sits there as a perennial risk. Hopefully we do everything we can from an ICT shared service to mitigate it, but members will always see examples where these I suppose highly intelligent hackers or whatever can get in and somehow cause damage to systems. So they're the sort of the major ones. The other ones that fall sort of slightly down in terms of high risks are things like the ongoing sustainability of our on-call service, and really competence, which is again one we're looking to mitigate through our St John's Training Centre. So there's some significant risks that we continue to deal with. But as I say, the significant one really is the SMCP. That's it in terms of an introduction. Chair, happy to take any questions on any of the risks.
Okay, members. I believe some of you referred to this item earlier on in the meeting. Are there any questions or points of clarification within this report? Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been on the authority for some considerable time. The message about the government new change to its airways policy, I mean, Matthew could have just written this about 4 years ago. It is extremely disappointing, and presumably protestations are being lodged to very little effect. Has anybody worked out what it's costing us?
So at the moment, actually, it's not costing us anything. The concern is what it will cost us as we move forward, Councillor Shelland. So initially, when we started out along this process many years ago, it was presented as it would be a cost saving, or certainly wouldn't be costing us any more. I think as the technology has advanced and moved on, then we're less confident that will actually be the case. So a lot of the lobbying will need to be making sure that as a service, we don't actually end up having to foot a significant amount of the bill if it does end up costing us more money.
Thank you.
Jocelyn.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was actually just interested in the cybercrime aspect, because if we look at the United States, I mean, what's happened, I'm not suggesting this is going to happen to the Fire Authority, but I want to get to a short point. If we look at what happened in the United States, they were busy concentrating on the election to make sure that it wasn't infiltrated by foreign authorities. And yet then what happened is that it's evident that the foreign authorities have infiltrated their internet systems, and they're absolutely not sure which ones have been taken over and which ones are simply under surveillance. And I was thinking that the issue about being an emergency service is really important from the perspective of cyber, as you have pointed out, Matthew, because when things depend on timing and on vehicles getting to a certain time at a particular time, on people being able to communicate at a particular time and get their messages through, I think it may be Mr. Councillor Over, as if he'd go on mute, it might help, I think. Anyway. Yeah, so I just really wanted to ask whether there are, in the context of emergency services, specialists of whom you know that do pay attention to the potential for infiltration into the cyber network, and whether the authority has had any specialist advice on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. So yeah, so annually we actually commission what's called a penetration testing program, where we actually commission a piece of work where we get people from the outside, specialists who try and infiltrate our systems. Now, what we do have, we have separation, complete separation in terms of our core network, if you like, and our control system, which is the mobilizing system for our appliances. So that sits independently. So they can't get through the, if you like, the wide area network and actually penetrate that way through our existing systems, because we put those elements in place. But nevertheless, we have that regime every single year where we actually almost challenge someone, right? What can you do? How can you get in? Because if you can, we obviously need to be shoring that up. Now, largely speaking, we're pretty good. I mean, you'll appreciate the highest, if you like, the most vulnerable area is our people, and often you'll see it through spam emails or various things that people get. That can often be our greatest vulnerability. But we again try to educate everybody within the service to prevent or certainly protect against that. So there's a lot of work that does go on an annual basis.
Yes, if I could just say, that's why it's good that you also have good relations with your staff too, because I actually teach computer crime, and there are instances, yes, where a disaffected ex-employee can create millions of dollars of damage. Yeah, but anyway, I'm assured by what you've said, Matthew. Thank you.
Any other questions? No. Okay then. Well, we've been asked to note that report, which we have done. If we can now move on to the next item, item 12, which is the public minutes of the Policy and Resources Committee held on the 17th of December. Are there any questions regarding these minutes? Mac?
Chairman, this is not related to that. I've just had a message come up on my computer from the County Council Software Centre saying that my computer is about to restart automatically in about 12 minutes. And I have a report at the end of the agenda. So I'm just warning, I don't seem to be able to overcome it. So just in case suddenly I am off the system, it just seems that the County Council's timing for doing their updates is a pain in the neck.
They're consistent.
But do disappear, you know why.
Yes. Okay, thanks for that heads up. Right, no questions on the policy committee. That we'll take it, the minutes are noted. Overview and scrutiny committee held on the 1st of October and in January. They're again for noting, but are there any questions? No, your hand's still up, Mac. No, it's not, it's gone down there. Right, no questions. Well, we've noted those minutes. Appointments to outside committees and bodies. That was a late circulation by email. And really what it is almost a straight swap where Andy's taken Janet's place on the committees that she sat on. And there is nothing else to report on. There being no further business, considering the items we had to tackle, we've done extremely well. I think having the seminar certainly helped. It was give you a good opportunity to dig into the budget, and that was useful for all of us. So can I thank you all for attending. Keep in touch, and to Andy, we'll be in touch with you and to try and get you up to speed on various items. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. Thank you.
Chairman. Bye-bye.
I could disappear
Thank
anyway.
you.